Okay, we are going to continue where we left off. We were talking about how liberalism and communism conflict in the real world. Yesterday we were talking about some of the measures that the United States took, and now we will look at the rejection of aid and where we left off. So the Soviets making sure that, or the communists rather, making sure that people weren't too influenced by liberalism and capitalism. They had their own plan. They called it the Molotov Plan. The Molotov Plan involved bilateral trade agreements, which is trading amongst one another, which helps to consolidate the economies of socialist countries. Additionally, to solidify the Soviet presence in Europe and to focus the economy towards Soviet Union rather than America. So they're trying to become an economic powerhouse, create economic dependency between Soviet nations, which, as you see the comment below, so think of the irony, the communist states maintaining open trade between each other to support economic growth and to keep communists from switching sides. They're essentially doing small-scale capitalism between their Soviet countries so that they can have some sort of economic prosperity. Are we filling out notes? I think. Still on the slide, or are you good? I'm good. Okay. So next up, I just have a couple of slides here, quite a bit of slides here, just looking at some of the impacts of the war. So here are some photos of Berlin. They're a bit blurry, but you can kind of clearly see that Berlin was destroyed by the war. Germany was quite destroyed during World War II, but Berlin in particular was destroyed quite a bit. The Russians were the first to get there, which I think is in the next slide. Okay. I believe I have this in the slides later on. We'll chat about that then. Some of this stuff is just a bit of a repeat. Okay, so this is just repeating the idea that as soon as World War II ends, that the Cold War begins, which is a conflict of ideologies and not necessarily guns, tanks, planes, and bombs. Although they did plenty of that as well. The post-war Germany. For those of you taking notes, don't worry too much about the next bunch of slides here. Another map just illustrating who got what of post-war Germany. So the Allies refused to allow the capital to become communist. So the city too was divided up into two separate sides with communists and capitalists. You could think of it as. Obviously, there was plenty of conflict in this time, so we already chatted about the Iron Curtain, which is a physical barrier, a wall between East and West Germany, but also East and West Berlin. I sent the one into the group. So again, Stalin and the communist dictatorship, this power scheme that they have going on, they're just not letting people be free. They're not letting them make their own decisions. So even when Berlin was under the occupation of both the communists and the West, you have this Berlin airlift blockade. So as you can see, Stalin's leadership, under Stalin's leadership, they attempted to starve Berlin into submission. So they're cutting off transportation of supplies in and out of Berlin. Ultimately, it's not very clear why. I don't know too much about this. It says 2.1 million West Berliners were affected by this question.
So, wait, why was there a Berlin Wall?
The wall was a physical barrier between two separate ideologies. So you have, like on the Russian side, you have communism. On the Western side, you have capitalism or liberalism.
And,
They built a wall
Democrat.
to kind of physically prevent, you know, what is it? They're just protecting their ideology, right?
Well, can someone go either way?
During that time, no, right? Like it was a complicated process. Right? I have a couple slides in here about that, but now the wall is gone. I think they tore it down in the 80s.
1989, I believe.
Yeah, probably late 80s. But if you were a citizen of Germany back then, it would have been complicated for you to get from one side of the wall to the other. Anyways, though, regardless, so at the end of the war, with the denazification process, the Allies have to stop seeing Germany as the enemy, which may have been challenging to do because they spent 4 to 5 years fighting Germany. They lost millions of soldiers, as we saw in the video yesterday, and I'll open up these photos here as well. But now for the people of Berlin, they're being held hostage by just another group of extremists, you could call them, the communists here. So I'll actually open up those photos and show you some of the stuff there. So here's some photos of Berlin at the end of the war. Let's see if we can so might be a bit hard to see, but you know, quite a bit of it is destroyed. The streets are still intact. Again, as you can see, kind of, this is also in the notes which has been posted. You know, a lot of the city has been destroyed here.
There's more to Google Classroom.
There's all this rubble, there's tanks, all this stuff needs to be cleared out now that the war is over. And Berlin has to be put back into a functioning city. More tanks. One thing to keep in mind is that the Nazis, they fought to the bitter end, essentially. Has anyone seen the movie Fury? With Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, a couple other people there. I think they illustrate quite well how the Nazis continued to fight even all the way up to the end of the war. Again, as you can see, a lot of the city is just destroyed. In the last days, the fight happened road to road. So literally the Nazis, they fought until, you know, every inch of Germany was captured. Which if you go back, you know, to our previous chapter, where we look at how, or that propaganda video as well, where you look at how Hitler was able to seize Germany and then to indoctrinate and brainwash its population. You know, these people were they had very much bought into this Nazi system, and they again, as I already said, they fought until every inch of it was captured. So this is the Reichstag, which is the German parliament. It's covered in graffiti after it's being seized by the Red Army. So the Russians got to Germany, or to Berlin first. They're the ones who captured it. And then they ended up graffitiing the whole thing. PowerPoint needs more organization. It's kind of all over the place right now. I apologize. Anyways, with the blockade, the Western powers, again, looking to promote more freedom, more choice, to allow a bit of democracy so that people are not ruled by fear and submission. You know, they attempt to counter the effects of the communist blockade. So in response, the Western Allies organized the Berlin airlift to carry supplies to the people in West Berlin. These flights were at the height of the airlift, flights were landing in West Berlin at the rate of 1 in every 3 minutes. So they're just constantly moving supplies in and out of Berlin, right? Trying to keep the city alive and sustain it. it lasted from June 1948 until April of 1949, so almost an entire year. Western planes flew over Berlin, dropping parachute-lowered supplies of food to the people of Berlin. They're dropping things like milk, bread, gum, chocolate bars, trying to keep the morale up. Right? So, for whatever reason, a lot of these communist states, things tend to go to hell in a handbasket very quick, for a variety of reasons, and which is complicated because, if you have more than the next person, are you then part of that oppressor class that Karl Marx talked about? Are you too privileged to then exist in that society? And so what should be done? Like for example, should people have access to chocolate bars? Like should people be able to just kind of eat whatever they want, to their heart or stomach's desire? Or should we have a government that regulates what people are allowed to do? That's the fundamental question between these two different philosophies. Who should make the choices in your life, and who gets to decide what is and isn't enough for you? Right. So one of the things Karl Marx said was that the utopia will exist and it'll function. Like everyone will get. Oh, sorry, it just slipped out of my mind. To each their need, essentially. Right? Everyone will get what they need. And so that's complicated because obviously if you look around, everyone needs slightly different things. And how do you fill that? Right? Well, what if one person needs a lot more resources than the other person? Do you take it away from someone? It's complicated. So skip past this. Okay, so this slide answers a bit more of your question that you asked about the wall, but is pretty much a repeat of everything that has already been said. Okay, here's a photo of some people. Kind of looks like they're crossing the border in between the two sides. So a lot of people from East Berlin, they fled from the communist side to the west and tried to escape into other parts of Europe, because many of these people who escaped, obviously they did so, many of them I believe did so illegally, but the challenge was that, for whatever reason in communist states, it's true of China, true of Russia, to an extent Cuba as well, I don't know as much, but for whatever reason, when people try to escape, when they get caught, they're usually punished. So my friend, Tony Chin, who I interviewed, his mother, who, she attempted to escape communist China several times, a couple times, and she failed on one of her attempts, and they put her into a prison. And this small, frail woman, they put her basically into a prison cell, which just had, cement floor. So she slept on this freezing floor after, being in the ocean water. And so, it's very strange that once people, if their system is so good and people are trying to leave, why are they, trying to actively prevent them from leaving? It's a very important question to consider with a lot of the communist states that existed. Should people be free to move in and out on their own? And I think for many people, even like North Korea, if you tried fleeing North Korea, I'm pretty sure they'll try to shoot you before you get to the other side. So escaping can be very difficult and challenging. I guess this third point here answers your questions. While the Soviets were worried that it was too easy to escape from East Germany, so in order to stop the easy flow of people leaving the communist utopia, they built a wall. But again, very, very ridiculous that, if they're doing something that's so good and so amazing, well, why are people trying to flee it? Some more photos of the Berlin Wall. And there was basically, I think they called it the red zone, this space in between East and West Berlin, where it was basically like a kill zone. It's very easy to spot someone running across, let's say 30, 40-foot space in between the two zones, and there was armed guards on either side, but I think primarily on the, I believe there's quite a bit of watchtowers on the communist side to make sure, like, hey, is anyone trying to escape? Are they trying to leave? If they are, it's time to shoot them, which again doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but. There you could see a little bit more easily illustrated this wide space in between. The wall then surrounded the city, and if it's not clear, obviously the side with the graffiti and the painting is the free side, right? So the same thing. I don't know how many of you are aware of the situation in Israel and Palestine, but there's quite a bit of segregation there as well. The Israelis have built a wall that's probably about 30, 40 feet high, and on that wall as well, we see a lot of graffiti and art on there to express some of the feelings of feeling trapped, of being oppressed, of being segregated, of being treated as subhuman and secondary citizens. So the Berlin Wall is 12 feet high, but in the parts of the Israel-Palestine wall that I saw were, easily 20 feet high, right, which would be like double the length of this roof, or height. So a little story. This is a rather famous photograph, which maybe I should get a poster of this at some point. They call this the leap into freedom. So this gentleman here, he was basically he was on the East Berlin side of the wall, and he, as you can tell, he's dressed as a soldier, and people on the west side saw him, and they had noted that he looked a bit stressed out, and looked like he was trying to figure something out, and obviously with the outcome, he was trying to determine whether he should escape over into West Berlin and escape into the West. And for many people that's a complicated choice. Like, he can escape in that moment, but his family is left behind. And the communists don't treat your family very well if you escape. Well, any dictatorship, quite frankly, if you escape, they're gonna go find your family. They're gonna interrogate them, which looks a lot like torture, potentially. Life can become very difficult for your family if you choose to leave. And so, anyways, this guy is mulling over these ideas, these thoughts in his head while he's trying to decide whether or not he should escape. And the people on the western side were trying to coax him over. They're trying to convince him, like, hey, like, come escape, like, we'll help you, we'll take care of you. And they noted that he was smoking like quite a bit, and he was very stressed out. Anyways, eventually he does decide to escape East Berlin, and he runs and he jumps over this barbed wire and escapes over, and cameraman fortunately was nearby and caught this photo, this very pretty epic, legendary photo. They say that as soon as he made it onto the western side, he was quickly scooped up by like a police thing, and they took him to a station. They basically gave him food, some more cigarettes, because he was pretty stressed. They calmed him down, and then figured out a way for him to get into the west. Long story short, though, so I'll just read it here. He was flown to Bavaria. So he stated in a 1990s interview that he only felt safe after the fall of the wall in 1989. He avoided visiting his parents back home. His former comrades wanted nothing to do with him. Eventually, he took his own life on June 20th, 1998. So, the decision to escape that communist state and not be able to see his family, not be to be ousted by his friends, weighed heavy on the guy, and eventually he took his own life for that. Here's another East German soldier helping a young boy to cross over to East Germany. to get back with his family. He was immediately removed from his unit. What happened to him afterwards is unknown. So to help you make sense of that, because if you're wondering, like, why is this person going into the East Germany? Well, when they built the wall, they did it very quickly. That was kind of in the notes in the last couple of slides. You know, how exactly, I don't know all the specifics, but they built the wall very quickly. And it was basically like, you know, if you hadn't crossed over to where you needed to be by nighttime the day before, by that next morning, you're pretty much screwed. And so the story behind this boy is that his father and him were in West Berlin, and they got separated, and, you know, somehow, for whatever reason, the dad ended up back in East Berlin, but the boy got left behind. Maybe he was with family or something, but they got separated. And so, you know, again, you know, who knows what the kid's fate would have been if he was just left alone on West Berlin by himself. But you know, the soldier that tried to help this kid reconnect with his family was more or less disappeared. You know, again, it's not clear what happened to him. And that was in 1961. So let's look at some of the ways that people resisted the communism as a rejection of liberalism, because, you know, nobody likes living under the thumb of someone else. So in Hungary, we have a variety of revolutions. So they're revolting against Stalin's government. They're forming militias. You know, people are banding together to fight back against this tyrannical government system. So less than 2 weeks, a new Hungarian government was formed. The state police were disbanded, and they were working towards a democratic state. So again, on the map, Hungary is here. So Russia, like the Soviets, are just right there. So all these countries that were nearby are always under threat of occupation from Soviet Russia, and quite frankly, Russia in general nowadays, you know, as Ukraine is learning, unfortunately. A few months after their revolution, the Soviet forces invaded, and they defeated the newly independent country, reversed the changes that came from the revolution, restored a pro-Soviet government. Okay. The central message here is that the irreversibility of communism and Soviet influence was sent around the world. Like, they're basically saying, either you play the game we're playing, or we'll hunt you down and fight you until we beat you and force you to play our game. Right? Which isn't a very good game if you are forced to play it. The Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, so 1968, reformist Alexander, I'm not even going to bother to say his last name, came to power in Czechoslovakian Socialist Republic. Under this new rule, he granted additional rights and freedoms to its citizens, loosening restrictions on the media, speech, and travel. So free speech he's adding in, which is a liberal value. Limited the power of the secret police, again, you know, equality, rule of law, and a 10-year plan towards democratic elections, which, you know, sure, that can go wrong, but a 10-year plan is better than, you know, just an empty promise of, yeah, we'll have democratic elections eventually. Soviets launched talks with the Czechoslovakian government to reach an understanding about the nature of the country's reforms. In 1968, Eastern armies from the Warsaw Pact countries, so the Soviet Union, Bulgaria, Poland, and Hungary, invaded and occupied Czechoslovakia. Within a year, this guy's reforms are reversed. So again, you know, a fundamental thing to take away from this is that, you know, both sides, let's be honest, play a pretty dirty game. I mean, if you learn more about the war in Afghanistan, the proxy warfare, Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, the invasion of the Middle East by America in the last 20, 40 years, and kind of what the Soviets were up to, you know, both of these sides do play a very dirty game, but I suppose on one side they're at least trying to make things more economically viable, and it's not clear what they're doing exactly on the other side. Right? But clearly, you know, allowing people to have rights and freedoms, more free speech, less just authoritarian rule by secret police is, you know, not what the communists like. Yugoslavia elected a communist government and aligned itself with the Soviet Union after World War II. But once the Yugoslavian leader started distancing himself from the Soviet Union, he was the only socialist leader to defy Stalin and reject Soviet demands for absolute loyalty to the Soviet Union. Under Tito's leadership, Yugoslavia became a founding member of the Non-Aligned Movement, an international organization of states who consider themselves not formally aligned with or against any major power bloc. Okay, so they did something a little unique. They said no to the Soviets, but they didn't say yes to the capitalists, to the classical liberal governments. And eventually these actions obviously lead to some sort of split ideological between Yugoslavia and the Soviets. And again, I feel like we've already cemented potential reasons why. Let's pause there for now.